Let's take a breath together, because I know this is a sensitive space for many of us, waiting, wondering, asking God when it'll be our turn, when the ache for connection will be met with something beautiful, something real. When God is preparing you for a beautiful relationship, the first and often most overlooked sign is that He begins with you, not your future partner, not the timing, not the external circumstances. He starts deep inside your heart in places only He can see, in layers you didn't even know needed healing. This is the phase of inner transformation, and it almost always comes before any external union. It's in this sacred space that God begins reshaping your understanding of love, identity, and worth. Maybe for years, love felt like performance, like you had to earn it, chase it, or fight to keep it. Maybe your past taught you that you had to be more to be chosen, more attractive, more successful, more agreeable. So now God gently removes those lies one by one, not to expose your weakness, but to anchor you in truth. And it's not always a dramatic change. Often it's quiet, subtle. You notice that you're no longer drawn to the same unhealthy patterns. You feel resistance toward people and situations that once looked exciting, but left you feeling empty. That's not boredom, that's growth. That's the Holy Spirit guarding your heart, teaching you to recognize what isn't for you so you can hold space for what is. Inner transformation looks like asking the hard questions. Why do I need this person's approval to feel okay? Why do I rush into connection when I feel insecure? Why do I fear being alone? These are the questions God invites you to explore, not to shame you, but to free you. Because the person you are becoming will determine the kind of love you're capable of receiving and giving. God doesn't want to just give you someone who's attractive, kind, or even spiritually mature. He wants to bring you into alignment with someone who matches the depth of healing and wholeness He's building in you. But He can't do that if you're still stuck in cycles that break you down instead of build you up. So He slows you down. Not to delay your dream, but to prepare your soul. He teaches you how to be alone without feeling abandoned. He teaches you how to love without losing yourself. He teaches you how to communicate, how to forgive, how to walk away when it's not right, and how to stay when it is. And in the process, you begin to see that love isn't something you chase, it's something you carry. It overflows from the work God is doing in you. By the time the relationship comes, it doesn't feel like a rescue mission or a fairy tale. It feels like a continuation of what God already started. Two people walking whole together. So if things seem quiet right now, if the waiting feels long, know this. God isn't withholding love. He's refining your capacity for it. Inner transformation is not a detour. It's the doorway. There comes a point in your journey where everything goes quiet. The texts slow down. The invites disappear. The people you once leaned on seem distant, and the world feels like it's moving forward without you. It's in these moments, the ones that feel like isolation, that many people assume something's wrong. But what if this quiet season isn't a punishment? What if it's preparation? God often uses solitude as a sacred space to shape you, not because He's cruel, but because He's intentional. When He wants to do something deep within you, something lasting, something holy, He often pulls you away from the noise, the opinions, the comparisons. He needs your attention. And the truth is, it's hard to hear His voice when you're surrounded by everyone else's. Isolation is not abandonment. It's an invitation. It's God saying, let's go deeper. It's in these moments that your identity begins to take root in Him, not in who loves you, texts you back, or validates your worth. It's in the quiet that your confidence is no longer borrowed from the attention of others, but built on the voice of God that says, you are mine. Many people rush to fill the silence with distractions, another situationship, another app, another party, another post. But healing doesn't happen in the noise. Transformation doesn't happen when you're constantly performing. Sometimes the most profound breakthroughs come when it's just you and God in the stillness, with no one to impress and nothing to prove. It's also in isolation that you begin to unlearn your dependency on romantic validation. You start asking yourself questions that you couldn't hear before. Why do I crave connection so deeply? What am I afraid of facing alone? What part of my heart still believes I need another person to feel enough? These questions hurt, but they heal, because on the other side of those questions is freedom. God doesn't isolate you to break you. He sets you apart to build you. And what He builds in the secret place can't be taken by public applause or romantic attention. It's in this season you learn how to be whole, how to enjoy your own company, how to worship with no spotlight, how to pray when no one's watching, and how to sit in your own presence without anxiety. That kind of growth prepares you for the kind of relationship that doesn't consume you but complements you. You start to realize that you're not waiting to be chosen, you already are. Not by a person, but by a purpose. And when that realization takes root, you won't settle for someone who simply fills a void. You'll wait for someone who's also been through their own season of becoming. Someone who doesn't complete you, but walks beside you, both of you, shaped by the same hands, molded in the same fire, ready for something beautiful together. There comes a shift in your life when you've been walking with God long enough to know the difference between chaos and peace. When you're truly being prepared for a beautiful relationship, one of the signs that often goes unnoticed is how clarity begins to replace confusion. Not all at once and not always in dramatic ways, but slowly, steadily confusion begins to lose its grip on your heart. In the past, maybe you found yourself stuck in cycles of wondering where you stood with someone. Conversations were vague, motives felt unclear. One day they were all in, the next they pulled away. That kind of emotional instability becomes familiar over time, so familiar that you start thinking it's normal. But God doesn't lead with confusion. When He's involved, clarity becomes the atmosphere, not the exception. This clarity doesn't just show up in others, it starts within you. You begin to notice your own desires shifting. You no longer tolerate what once seemed thrilling, but always left you anxious. The thrill of the chase starts to lose its appeal. Mixed signals start to look like red flags instead of romantic tension. That's a sign of growth. That's evidence of discernment becoming sharper, more refined. God begins to stabilize your inner world. He brings peace to the emotional waves that once tossed you back and forth. He helps you hear His voice over the noise of your own impatience or insecurity. And with that, you begin to recognize the presence of God, not just in the exciting moments, but in the steady, quiet ones too. He begins to teach you that real love doesn't play games. It doesn't make you question your worth. It doesn't keep you guessing to maintain power. As you continue to align with His heart, decisions that used to torment you now feel simpler. Not necessarily easier, but clearer. When someone isn't good for your spirit, you feel it sooner. When someone walks in alignment with the kind of love God has been preparing you for, your spirit doesn't panic, it finds peace. That's not chemistry alone. That's spiritual alignment. Even in the waiting, this clarity gives you rest. You don't find yourself constantly needing signs, confirmations, or constant reassurance. You know that God is not teasing you with hope. He is training you to trust Him, and trust brings clarity. Because when you trust the one writing your story, you stop demanding immediate answers and start looking for His peace in every decision. So if you find yourself less anxious and more steady, even in your singleness, that's not apathy. That's maturity. If your prayers have gone from God, why not them, to God, I trust your no as much as I trust your yes, then something deep is happening. You're not just waiting for love, you're being prepared to recognize it when it comes. And that recognition starts with clarity. There's a pivotal moment in your growth when the kind of love you crave begins to change, not because you're becoming colder or pickier, but because your spirit is maturing. One of the most beautiful signs that God is preparing you for a meaningful relationship is that you start attracting, and even more importantly, desiring wholeness over drama. What once looked exciting now feels exhausting. What once gave you butterflies now gives you a headache. And you don't see that shift as a loss, you begin to see it as protection. You may have gone through seasons where the people you were drawn to were inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or full of red flags you tried to paint white. You clung to potential. You chased chemistry. You confused intensity for intimacy. And maybe back then you thought the ups and downs were just part of falling in love. But as God works on you, He opens your eyes. He doesn't just change your standards, He transforms your appetite. You start to want different things. Peace starts to feel attractive. Stability starts to look beautiful. You begin to crave someone who doesn't spark chaos, but brings calm. Someone whose presence feels like a safe place, not a guessing game. It's not that you're lowering your expectations. It's that you're finally raising them to align with what God has always wanted for you. Someone who is whole, not perfect. Someone who can love you without wounding you in the process. And this doesn't mean you'll never feel drawn to the wrong people again. The enemy knows how to send distractions dressed as desires. But the difference now is that you see it sooner. Your tolerance for dysfunction weakens. Your spirit speaks up faster. That uneasiness you used to ignore now feels louder, and you've learned not to silence it just to keep someone around. God uses this shift to show you what love really looks like, not the Hollywood version filled with manipulation and chase scenes, but the kind of love that mirrors his own steady, sacrificial, and honest. You stop trying to fix broken people in hopes they'll stay. You stop auditioning for love you don't have to beg for. You stop settling for temporary attention when God is preparing you for lasting connection. And something even more powerful happens. The kind of people who are drawn to you begin to change too. Whole recognizes whole. People who've done their inner work will see and value yours. They won't be intimidated by your standards. They'll honor them. They won't play with your heart, they'll protect it. Because they've also gone through their own process of refinement, and they're not here to recreate the past. They're here to build something new, something rooted in God's timing, peace, and purpose. So if you find yourself losing interest in chaos and craving something quieter, deeper, and more stable, don't second guess it. That's not boredom, that's growth. That's God preparing your heart for a love that won't destroy your peace, but will multiply it. Before God ever brings someone into your life to love, He first calls you back to Himself. One of the clearest signs that He's preparing you for a beautiful relationship is that your relationship with Him begins to deepen. Not out of desperation, not because you're begging for a blessing, but because your soul starts recognizing what it truly needs first Him. For many, the journey begins in a place of longing. The ache for companionship can feel overwhelming. It's easy to think a relationship will fix the loneliness or quiet the insecurities. But God in His grace gently interrupts that thinking. He shows you that the connection you're really craving isn't with a person, it's with Him. Because even the best human love will leave empty spaces only He can fill. As this realization sinks in, something begins to shift in your heart. You stop treating God like a vending machine for relationships and start seeking Him as your source. The questions change from, when will someone love me, to, God, how can I love you better? You begin to find joy in the quiet moments of prayer. Scripture stops feeling like a chore and starts becoming a conversation. Worship moves from routine to refuge. In this season, your identity starts to solidify. You stop tying your worth to whether someone chooses you romantically and begin anchoring it in the truth that God already has. You realize that being single isn't a holding cell, it's holy ground. A space where God becomes not just your creator, but your companion, your shepherd, your friend. And it's not always an easy process. There will still be days when the waiting feels long and the silence feels loud. But the deeper your relationship with God gets, the less desperate you feel for something temporary. You begin to understand that love from a person will never be enough if it doesn't flow from the love you already received from God. This depth also refines what you're looking for in a partner. When your heart is rooted in God, you're not easily swayed by charm, status, or surface-level attraction. You're drawn to spiritual substance. You want someone who knows how to pray, how to listen to God, how to lead with humility, and how to love from a place of wholeness. Because now you know what it's like to be loved unconditionally, and you're not willing to trade that kind of peace for short-term attention. God knows that the kind of relationship you're praying for requires a version of you that's anchored in Him. He's not preparing you for love just so you can feel butterflies. He's preparing you to carry love with strength, grace, and discernment. And the only way to do that well is to know the author of love first. When you're rooted in Him, everything else, including a beautiful relationship, begins to grow in its proper time. When God starts preparing your heart for a relationship that reflects His design, He doesn't just change who you're attracted to, He changes how you see love altogether. One of the clearest signs of this transformation is when love begins to look less like a feeling you chase and more like a mission you carry. It stops being something that only lives in butterflies and late-night conversations and starts becoming something weighty, sacred, and purposeful. This shift doesn't come from a place of cynicism or emotional burnout. It comes from revelation. It's the moment you realize that true love isn't about being completed by someone, it's about being called together by God for something greater than yourselves. Love stops being the destination and becomes the context in which you live out faith, service, and sacrifice. You stop asking, who will make me happy? And start asking, who can I build with? When you see love as mission, you no longer romanticize the idea of being chosen just for the sake of validation. You understand that being in a relationship is not about filling a void, it's about fulfilling a calling. You start desiring someone who doesn't just stir your emotions, but strengthens your walk with God. Someone who knows that commitment is more than chemistry and who is prepared to fight for the connection when feelings fluctuate. This perspective changes how you handle conflict, how you communicate, and how you commit. Love no longer becomes a matter of, how do I feel right now? But what has God called us to do together? That question carries weight. Because when life gets hard, and you won't lean on just emotion to hold things together. You'll lean on shared purpose, prayer, and a clear understanding that God brought you together not to escape struggle, but to glorify Him through it. Love as mission also humbles you. It teaches you that you're not just looking for someone who fits your preferences, but someone who complements your purpose. You begin praying not just for compatibility, but for spiritual alignment. You want someone whose life points toward Jesus, not perfectly, but intentionally. Someone who doesn't just love you emotionally, but loves God deeply enough to love you well. And as you grow in this mindset, you begin preparing for that kind of love by becoming that kind of person. You're not waiting around passively. You're healing, serving, listening to God, and becoming the kind of partner who doesn't shrink when the mission gets heavy. Because you know love isn't about coasting, it's about co-laboring. When love becomes mission, everything changes. Dating isn't just dating anymore, it's discernment. Marriage isn't just the next life stage, it's spiritual stewardship. And choosing someone isn't just about who you like, it's about who God has equipped you to love with intention, maturity, and purpose. So when God is preparing you for a beautiful relationship, it rarely looks like a fairy tale unfolding. It looks like pruning, refining, growing. It looks like isolation that builds intimacy with Him, clarity that replaces confusion, and a deep shift in what your heart truly desires. It's not about being perfect or having it all figured out. It's about being willing to let God do the inner work first. Because only then can you carry the kind of love that reflects His heart. You begin to walk differently. You no longer chase chaos or beg for attention. You wait not passively, but purposefully. You start to value peace over performance, mission over emotion, and wholeness over fleeting excitement. And in that place, you realize that a beautiful relationship isn't something you stumble into, it's something you're prepared for. And if God is preparing you now, trust that He's not wasting time. He's shaping you into someone who won't just find love, but steward it well. Someone who's not just waiting for the right person, but becoming one. Because when it's truly from Him, love doesn't confuse you, diminish you, or distract you, it deepens you. It reflects Him. And it brings both of you closer to the one who wrote the story in the first place.